of a finite substance such as gold, the truth is that the cost and derived value of every produced unit of gold are not equal. Some period of conditions may justify producing gold as necessary. Others may not. Why not let a truly free market determine the relative value of gold? In some cases, the market might justify producing more expensive gold, for instance, after the less expensive gold is occupied by existent consumption. Yet if someday we intended to justly determine that it generally requires at least so much cost or effort to produce an ounce of gold, and if we make that the value of money, then that money thus cannot be a market-determined token of value of all things, nor can it be a market-determined value of gold. But if we have fixed the value of gold below a later, higher cost of production, we will have made it uncost-worthy to render the production of the market which the market may yet later need. Thus, even by fixing a value which once was just, later, more expensive conditions of production may preclude prospective producers from mining gold for a future market, simply because the fixed price is insufficient to cover the costs of production. Can the whole valuation system change so that the fixed price can be accommodated by the market for gold? It is pretentious to assert any system has such a capacity unless all values and monetary commitments are perpetually adjusted to all such developments. In fact, no system but mathematically perfected economy provides such a mechanism, because only mathematically perfected economy provides truly free markets, and because only mathematically perfected economy makes it possible for each market both to determine and to fetch just prices without affecting the value basis of all other markets. Nor is any reasonable method of evaluation critical to mathematically perfected economy. If the cost of productive effort is justified to both the consumer and producer, mathematically perfected economy alone sustains, without inflation, deflation, or multiplication of debt, not only the transaction, but the work necessary to repay the monetary obligation. Thirdly, then, because the development of expedient and comprehensive methods of evaluation is useful to all of us in every prospective endeavor or transaction, we can and should develop and debate ideas, and we can refine an agreeable concept by solving for our differences. But even then, unless our ultimate method of determining value is perfect, have we a right, or is it even necessarily useful that we impose it? Just about anyone on the planet has spent most of their adult years again and again conjuring how to conceive of the relative value of what we do, in respect to the value of whatever each of the rest of us does. This thinking is all that justifies any endeavor or transaction. Some of us take the thinking seriously. Sometimes casual consideration suffices. We may have heard ridiculously incomprehensive concepts which are purported to account for value. In a certain case, a claimed 400 or some odd scientists, for instance, have endorsed making energy the currency of trade, without the first explanation of how we would justly do so, and so, as the following arguments invalidate the proposition of making time the unit of currency, so too do they invalidate mere energy as a singular basis of value. In the least, we are to understand that both are inappropriate because they do not account for all the vital factors which comprise value or justify production. You want to consider making time the unit of the currency. Why won't that work? Let's say you have X number of children and you need them to weed the yard. Being a fair man, you do your best to divide the yard, despite its different numbers and kinds of weeds and terrain, into an equal task for each. How would you do this so that the ostensible value of their labors is equal? How would you take into account the exact difficulty of the makeup of the soil and the mixture of the weeds, so that indeed you gave them each an equal job? Suppose you gave me an answer to your quest for a method of exactly determining value. The first thing I would ask you then is how you measured each of these things exactly. Did you count the weeds? Did you divide the yard into areas where the borders of the areas explicitly included the intended weeds? Did you test the difficulty and time required to pull each different weed out, complete with the roots of each? You would probably answer, no, of course not. Why? Practically without exception, we don't even ascertain or measure the criteria exactly, as would be vital to determining value exactly. And so, in fact, no matter what you had answered, the principle of an ostensibly exact method of determining the allotted tasks isn't even applied to the units of area, varied matter or conditions, or even to the number of weeds. Likewise, do we count the studs in a home we are about to buy? There is a good enough reason we don't even try to account for all things exactly. First of all, we regularly can't. But if you did, the job of accounting exactly for exactly all factors might be far greater than actually pulling all the weeds itself. So, because you can't divide the yard into X areas that result in an equal effort for each of your children, which in turn results with ostensibly equal work in your children all finishing in the same time. Neither can you say that you have figured the job so that time spent on the different parts of the job is of equal value. After all, your X children, starting at the same time, will not finish at the same time, because you haven't even determined a way to make their time spent at the job of equal value or volume. But neither two, unless the production of each is the same periodically, would they finish at the same time, even if you had divided the job exactly, because neither is the effort they spend across time of exactly equal value. Using time as a standard, therefore, does not determine equal work. Only in the most exceptional case, in fact, does it determine equal work, because people rarely work at exactly the same rate or render production of exactly the same quality. A perfect system of evaluation must take all these things into consideration and account for them exactly. After all, If one welder puts 4 10-inch Schedule 40 joints together in a day's work, and if a second welder puts together 20, and if one of the first welder's daily welds generally fails an X-ray at the refinery, in which every weld must prove worthy, the redoing of the first welder's one failure a day may be more costly than the sum of the rest of their work, or 3 welds. If no one else is working to that standard, to the contractor who has bid on the job, that welder's work is worth nothing, or it may even be rightly considered to have a negative value. If, on the other hand, everyone else but the second welder works to that standard, however, then generally, as it may generally be necessary to do the work of 8 welds, or 2 days' production, to get 4 good welds, or 1 day's attempted production, that's the price of the labor of production the contracting outfit may be forced, by the trials and tribulations of welding, to contend with. But that means the second welder, who comprises the lone exception, is doing 40/4 of a day's work of the general volume of production of work every day per time. For the productive volume of their efforts, then, are we not to pay them 10 times the wages of the other welders, which is indeed the comparative value of what they are producing for the contractor? Well, in certain, even potentially prevalent cases, this might not happen because the hour might be a selective simplification which serves the employer to cheat labor from justified pay. By bidding jobs on the low end of labor costs and not rewarding productive labor, contractors can take substantial unearned profit. The quality of the second welder's work might be 10 times as great as the usual welder's as well. Shall we pay them 100 times as much as the usual welder then? If the quality of the work exceeds the requirements of the job spec, then the contractor is not justified in doing so. But the contractor is justified in at least rewarding the more productive second welder relative to how much work they perform daily, especially as this reduces the risks of weld failure and potential later consequent costs to the contractor. The second welder is valuable. Their time is worth far more to their employer. The welders are also exposed to dangerous gases and to asbestos. Do we simply give them the same wage per hour that we award a student who hands prepackaged hamburgers through a drive-up window? Anyone, therefore, who tells you they account for all factors exactly, which determine the value of productive effort exactly, is yanking your leg. In fact, in any system such as this, where the relative value of one thing can only be known by the relative value of all other things, until we have a comprehensive system of determining the exact value of everything, we do not have a comprehensive system for determining the exact value of anything. In fact, we find that given values often are rightly even in flux if we account for the difficulties of production, which comprise periodic differences in the job of production. Therefore, a purportedly exact method of determining value must account for these differences in the job of production. Personally, I figure I've given as much quality effort to determining the value of production as anyone. And what I'm about to tell you is, I see little sense or benefit in trying to determine value with purported exact